related to this project and the likes. So we have Mr. Emmanuel in our midst, which is an expert in this area and will be sharing one or two tips with us regarding that. All right, Mr. Emmanuel, you are welcome. I believe you might take maybe a few minutes to tell us more about you before you
All right.
proceed. All right, you have the floor, sir. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Alex. All right, my name is Emmanuel, and I'm a research engineer in the UK with Sheffield Hallam University. My background is actually tech, of which mainly most of the research centers around that. But looking at the world where we're in, I think tech is everywhere. Everybody's using tech in research, and I think that's a brief background I can actually give, unless there is any other. And in case we connect through LinkedIn and anywhere, then we can actually talk more. But that's a brief background about myself.
Yeah, please go ahead, share your screen. Let's go.
All right. Okay. So before I share my screen, this has to be a bit practical. So just as have been introduced, and Alex has already said of what we're going to look at. Many other times that once you've done your research, and I listened to the last part of what people were saying about doing forms, then apart from that, like giving incentive to research and all. Um, I didn't get the chance to just tap in, but when you're actually trying to communicate research or get genuine research responses, and then you give people something before they actually do it, of course, apart from it being non-ethical, you will find that the type of responses you get usually will be a bit slightly or different from in case there was no incentive. So that's just my take, and I wanted just to bring that forth. I heard most people saying, and it was very good to hear what the responses, especially what I hear. I think Dr. Edwards also said, like, and people agreed saying if you give incentives before you do the research, it's non-ethical. And apart from that, for me, I always think you are always going to get responses which are slightly or maybe different from what you'd get without doing that. That's why it's always encouraged to give at the end. All right, so my session is going to be a bit practical, briefly, maybe 40 minutes or less. So while I will be presenting, showing you some presentation that I've actually made, I'll be looking at the first start. We'll be looking at research, literature review, how to conduct literature review. Then later, I will actually look at how to make your literature findings and how you can actually present those findings. So don't worry about the slide. We'll actually share the slide at the end. That's why I don't want to much concentrate on it. But is everybody able to get me all right? Like, is my voice audible, right?
Yeah, very audible.
All right.
If
Okay.
possible, you can zoom in your presentation a bit, make it a bit bolder, possible, if possible.
All right. Let me do this. I'll stop presenting, then I start again. All right. Let me try to do that. Okay. Is it zoomed now, right?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, go
All
on.
right. Okay. So I'll be changing screens as we'll be looking at it. So most of the times when you're trying to do research, and I'll start with the papers of the research. Then we'll go into literature review and some of the things that I have planned, like are a bit practical. So when you're looking at literature, especially, you want to find what people have actually been looking at. In this case, the papers of the research. So every time that you are trying to conduct research, the main goal should be to produce findings, and then those findings that you're going to actually have the output to have a meaningful insight. So in this case, that's why I think when Alex was saying, apart from conducting literature review, how can you present your work? Because if you do your research and you've done your research very well in your field, it can be a technical field, it can be a medical field, it can be a social science field. But if you're not able to communicate those findings in a way that people that actually need that literature or that information, it doesn't make sense. And most of the times, that is what is very hard for, I can say academic. Like most of the times when we're doing our research, we find that we are into the research and are able to find all those findings, but presenting them for people to actually make insight out of that, that is mainly what is very hard for people. So you have done your literature review, but are you able to present your literature? So I'll come and look at the core objectives of research. Of course, and maybe you have done research methods, how different types of research methods that you can actually conduct. You doing interviews. These days is technology. You can do Google Forms, you can do interviews, recordings, and all that. Then what you are expected to do, for example, research outputs, how to engage with research. Then there is the ethical part of research. So, for example, with the rise of technology and AI, how can we make our research ethical? Then we'll look at timelines. Maybe you have a research that you're trying to do, how you can break it into different timelines for you to be able to do those tasks and sprints to conduct your actual research. So I'll be going through different screens and sharing how most of the times when I'm actually doing my own research, how I actually do it. And I'll start with literature review. If you have a question, please just raise your hand. I think Google has where you can raise your hand or type in, then I can be able to address it. So that we just make it more practical than just me talking alone. Okay, so literature review. Most of the times when someone tells you to conduct a literature review, in this case, you're doing your research, you want to actually find out what is actually there. In this case, you're looking at the papers of that research. So an example I would give is if you are conducting a literature review, let's say in maybe social sciences or education, you're trying to look at already existing literature, then in that existing literature, you're going to be looking at what other people have actually found. An example I'll give is every research that you are actually conducting, I'm sure you have put in the papers or the objectives, or maybe what you want to understand, or you're identifying a major problem. You, as an academic or as a researcher, one of the things you have to look at is what have other people done in this research field. So in this case, your literature review should be revolving around reading what other people have done. Now, I think with the rise of technology right now, everyone is going the short way, and it's much easier. We understand, or where you can say, oh, they're different. Like a long time ago, it used to be you go to the library, you open books, you read the book, you go out and get another book, another book, another book. But right now, everything is on the internet. You can send everything to AI. AI can summarize things for you. You get that. But in that case, when actually finding, and we'll come to that, presenting that research makes it harder for you to actually know, because some of the literature you would have filtered out, AI will just give you what you need. Maybe an example I'd give is, imagine we're looking at a research that maybe centers around maybe agriculture and maize crop, maybe in a given area. So I'll be giving examples from where I'm from. I'm from Zambia. So let's say we are doing research in a given area. Okay, so most of us in the chart maybe from Nigeria. Let's say we get a given area, and then we're doing research about maybe growth or literature review about growing of cassava maize in this area. We target farmers and all. If we are just to get the literature that has already been done or research that has already been done and pass it through AI, I'm sure some of the things you'd have filtered and learned from what people have done, you would not get it. So I think one of the first things as you are conducting your research, especially as a student, when you identify the area of what you are trying to do, identify the papers or what you're trying to bring out. And that's the most important part of literature review. Are you going to read literature, find out what people have found out, and you see everybody's gap that they were actually putting up? Now, an example is I'll show you, for example, if unless anyone has a topic that they are researching on, maybe they can type in the chat. Then I'll be using that as the best foundation of the research when searching for research papers, so that as you are conducting research, how can you go about doing your literature review, writing your literature review, presenting your literature review as a report. Then we'll look at how can you cite the work, and also if I have anyone that is conducting any research, either medical, technical, social science, I can type maybe their research work. Then we'll be using that as an example for doing the whole process from conducting literature review to writing literature review, then to also using AI. So I don't know if I have any volunteers. I don't want to be the only one talking to make it a bit hard. So I want it to be as interactive as possible. Anyone to volunteer with a topic that would want to work around? All right. So, okay. So Joshua is actually put up, okay, malaria epidemiology in Kaduna State University Clinic. All right. So, okay, I'll copy that as, okay. So imagine we are conducting a literature review around that topic that actually been put. So we're looking at maybe malaria. So an example is a lot of people have done different research around malaria, but maybe we want to narrow it down to a given region, like the way Joshua has put it out, maybe Kaduna. Now, when conducting your literature, mainly if you just want to put your literature around a given scope, it won't be enough. At some point, you also want to look at what other people have done in a given area. Then you narrow it down to your country, narrow it down to a given area, like now in this case, Kaduna. So it will be, you look at a broader aspect, then bringing it down to a given region. So for me, most of the times I would want, like the way the topic has been given, then I'll look at different places. Mostly when I'm doing literature review, my first go-to area is Google Scholar, because most of the research output, whether you have published it in high impact journals or you have published it in different books, usually it has to go to Google Scholar. Like Google Scholar brings most of the research work together. So an example I would give is, I already copied that. So this is an example of what I usually do. So Google Scholar, I'll share my screen. So let me share my, how do I share my entire screen? Okay, so
I'm so sorry, Manuel, to interrupt you.
yeah,
I think to keep this very focused,
uh-huh.
I just dropped a topic which the research for this project is actually will be on. I think it would be
Okay.
nice if you can use that exactly for the example. Thank you.
Oh, that's actually better. That's why I asked in. Okay, so understanding. Okay, so if we're gonna pick that, okay, that's actually better. So understanding student integrity and learning culture in Nigeria. Okay, so imagine we are picking that as a research topic. Actually, in my presentation, that's actually what is there. Okay, so imagine we're doing that. Mainly, your go-to area is, imagine we're conducting a literature review on this. My main advice is go to Google Scholar, look at the main papers that center around that. Now, an example is most papers, because of the kind of topics and the region they are coming from, they're not highly maybe read by the international audience. Now, an example I would give is when you go on Google Scholar, there, I think, let me move my video so that I can just have the audio. Is that all right? Okay, let me do that. Okay, so then that way. All right, so most of the times, some papers usually have, maybe if the topic is international or more people have done research in that topic, you're highly going to find that the papers that are actually on top are maybe the most recent, or they are the most cited, or the journal is high impact, maybe where the research was published is highly visible. Like most people usually go to that journal for search. Now, when conducting a literature review, like myself, first I'll look at the topics that actually have more matching words than what I am actually doing. An example is our topic is understanding student integrity and learning in Nigeria. So if we pick that as a topic on Google Scholar, you're going to have multiple papers. Now, for literature review, especially before you present your findings, most literature review, especially if it's undergrad literature review, you're always going to have a limit of how many papers you'd read. So honestly, there's no set standard saying, okay, you should read this amount of papers. It depends with how much literature is there. There are certain topics that actually have less literature. And we can't say, oh, read 200 papers or read 100 papers. But narrowing it down to maybe undergrad, you'd actually pick papers, maybe starting from 20 to 30 papers, or you get that range, 20, 30, 40 papers. Now, the reason why when we're saying pick these papers is you conducting the literature review, you're going to be going paper by paper, looking at what the person looked at, and I'll come to that, how the research impacted the given region, maybe the limitations. So for me, I would come to a paper like this one. If you see from the bottom here, you can see how many times the paper was cited, maybe the number of versions the paper had, because sometimes when you publish a paper, maybe there are some corrections needed, it will be corrected and the versions will also exist. The first versions where there were less corrections until the final version where there are more corrections. Some journals don't put that up, they just put the final version. Some journals put that maybe because some data has actually changed over the years. That's why they put maybe different versions as you are researching. So for me, I usually pick a given number of papers, then I would download. Now, other people still don't download, they'll just read them on the internet. An example I would give is if this paper is one I want to read, I would go to the paper. Hopefully my browser will open it up. Okay, so this is an example of a paper. And these days, every browser or PDF openers, AI, it can help you summarize that. We'll look at the integrity of that. So this is an example of a research paper that was actually written. And for mainly you as a researcher, what you're going to look at is the method they used, the methodology they used. Apart from that, you're going to go to the actual findings, the actual output or conclusion. So you see what they actually discussed and wrote that. Then you see the conclusion, what they came up with. Okay, so in this case, you're going to find maybe the certain limitations they came up, they faced, or some of the conclusions, maybe it's between a given range, maybe a year, maybe from 2006 to 1997. When you see that is mainly of your interest, you would save that paper. So I usually save a paper, download it on my computer, go to another one. Now, to make it easier for you to track your literature review, one of the things for me that I actually do is I keep a record of an Excel spreadsheet. So I'll just give you an example of a template that I actually had. If you don't want to keep an Excel spreadsheet, my advice would be keeping your files in Mendeley. Now, Mendeley is a referencing manager. The good part about it is you can have Mendeley in Microsoft Word. I don't know if it's still sharing my screen. Let me see. Okay.
You can see your screen, yeah.
Oh, okay. So an example is Microsoft Word. Most of the times when I'm doing research, that's why you write. So I usually have two ways of how I do my literature review, which I'll actually show you in this part. So if I download that paper and I would keep it, I would keep it in a referencing manager. Now, I'm not saying everybody should use Mendeley as a referencing manager. There's Zotero, there's RIFM. There are different referencing managers. The good part about referencing managers is they keep record of the papers you have read. They'll be coming when you have signed in. So I'll show you an example of how to put it I'll ask for questions in case anyone has questions. So Microsoft has a referencing tab. That referencing tab, that's where you find Mendeley. Mendeley looks like this. Mendeley, or if it's Zotero you're using as a reference manager, looks like that. Now, if you downloaded the paper, for me, I'll show you how I would do it. For example, you have to create an account, of course. When you create an account with Mendeley, when you download the paper, there is a way you would upload it to the reference manager. Now, this depends with different people and how they would want to do it. But that way, when you read the paper, just that it's taking long to load, but it will. When you read the paper, you can mark the paper as a read paper. Like, for example, you have read it, then you can keep notes on it in Mendeley. Okay, why is it not opening? It's still open. Hold on. Okay, let me try to reopen it again. All right, so it looks like that when you download it, and you can use a web version of it. What I usually do myself is I have where I can maybe create folders. So I would do something like maybe import or create a folder. Hold on. Let me just give an example. I wish, oh, come on. Hopefully it will allow me. Why is it not allowing me? All right. Okay, I'll use this. I'll just, okay, I'll create a subsection, but it's supposed to be able to create a section. Okay, create a section. Let's say literature review. Then that is your section. Then from there, this section is where I'll be putting my papers. Now, this is me using Mendeley. Mendeley looks similar to Zotero, depending on type of reference, the way you want your screen to be looking like. Now, an example is when I was conducting my literature review back, when I was finishing up my research work, I would download the papers and put them in this way. So it's more like uploading. So you can just drag and drop them in your folder. Now, the reason why I used to do this is if I want to read the paper, I'll read the paper. I would make notes on the paper. I would ask AI to give me a summary. That was maybe 2 years ago. That's when that thing came to summarize for you. That way, at least if you don't want to read the whole full paper, at least you would get your own notes, which you would write on the paper here. You'd say, oh, I found this paper was about Nigeria. You write your information about that. I'll come to the actual paper when we upload the actual paper. So that way, it makes it very easy for you to keep track of papers you have read. Then, apart from that, another way that I do this is where you yourself keep a record in Excel. I know it's old school, but that way you'd have a layout of papers. So I had the column. I have to look for. I'll bring the screen up. I had the column of papers that I've read, papers that I've not read. Then I'm actually ticking and highlighting which ones I've read. That way, it gives you room to read your literature. Now, the reason why I'm pointing up to this is these days, because of integrity and AI and use of AI and malpractice, most people don't read literature because AI reads for them. Now, the good part about AI and reading your papers is quicker, faster, and you get to the conclusion faster. But when you read the paper, for me, I always feel like you become an expert in the field, because if someone tells you, oh, did you read the paper about perspective academic writing in Nigeria? You would actually know the paper, who wrote the paper, and the year the paper was published if you actually read the paper. And if you actually read the paper and you have it in Mendeley, even when you are citing the paper, that would actually be much easier. So an example is, let me download it. The paper that I actually got is this one. So I'll download this so that I show you an example of what I meant. I'll put it on desktop. Then I'll put it in Mendeley like that. Download it. Probably I'll just drag and drop it. then the paper will be there. Then I'll read it from here. I'll make highlights if I want to write anything about it. If I want to get a summary of it, Mendeley will do that for me. And if I want to maybe get the citation, is it possible to do that? Okay, so if I want to get the citation, the year the paper was actually produced, URL, and to export it another way or any other format, I would do that. Now, for me, because some papers don't actually have maybe other details to fill in, I would put in maybe even the month if when you're writing your actual research maybe report and they need all the details, that would become useful. Now, the reason why referencing papers like this is easier is you're going to be writing summary on each and every paper that you have read. Now, that way, when you come to write your actual literature review, it will be very easy for you to know which sections you are to do. Now, this is where AI comes in, and I always tell people you can use AI for things like a layout of your actual research literature review. How do you want it? For example, I'm conducting a literature review on understanding Nigeria and the learning culture. An example I would say is, let's go to the easiest AI tool, Google. In that way, I would put it in Google. Then if my mind is not giving me an example of how my literature review would look like, I would actually now ask AI, what are some of the format, or maybe produce a format for me for a literature review on understanding student integrity and learning culture in Nigeria. In that way, at least AI has opened you up to some of the sections that may be out there, but does not help you write the whole paper. So in that case, I'll do things like go to the AI mode, then I ask it to give me maybe a layout, something like this. So ask it maybe a layout of a review, or maybe literature review, literature review, maybe format paper. In that way, it will be much easier for you to see maybe the sections that are actually needed. So it will give you things like a paper format. Okay, so let me just ask it like a journal paper format. If you want, you can use ChatGPT to ask for you to maybe ask for a layout, that if that is what is easier. Now, in that way, maybe to give you maybe a layout, it's just an example, and this is just Google. I'm sure if you ask complex models like ChatGPT, to give you even a better format. So you look at the title, your abstract, introduction, your method, your results, your conclusion, maybe even references. So that is an example of how you'd maybe say a layout of such a topic. Now, once you are done with that, that's where now you go back to your Word document. So in your Word document, you'll be putting these sections. So let me just get the actual. Okay, let me do this. Just a minute. Okay, so while I'm looking for, I want to get a format that I actually asked ChatGPT to generate for me. Is there any question, or maybe someone wants to say something or a contribution as we are going on? You can still type in the chat in case you are not able to speak. Okay, I want to share a different screen. Okay. Okay, since nobody has typed or asked any question, I'll go to my screen where I asked ChatGPT. Where is my screen? Okay, this one. So, okay, an example is I asked ChatGPT to give me a literary review layout of us conducting a literary review and understanding integrity and learning culture in Nigeria. So it gave me even examples of database. So because of technology, this honestly, when something like this is happening, I always tell people like it's not AI doing the research for you, it's actually brainstorming with you. Okay, a paper should look like this, maybe. So I would pick, usually when I'm actually doing a literature review, I would pick the format in the context that maybe it has given me. So an example would be topics like introduction, where you look at maybe the purpose of a study, the scope of a review, you give maybe the year, from which year to what year, the methodology you're going to conduct. And most of the times when doing a literature review and it's supposed to be published later, you should explain maybe how you Google searched or what your search criteria, what were your keywords you're using. In that way, would know like the person doing the research actually looked at it. For example, we're using just Google Scholar alone. We're using even other things like Scopus, uh, which is an academic database for papers. We're also looking at Web Science. So it's you looking at the whole range, telling the people that you are trying to communicate your research to, saying, I conducted this research, I looked at Google, I looked at Web Science, and this is what I came up with. Apart from that, types of words you're using. Now, because of AI can actually draft these things for you, but in that way, it will give you room to say, okay, while I'm doing the search now, this is what you're going to be using when putting in Google Scholar. Mainly, that's what I do. Then I find papers with these keywords and then download them. I'll come and show you an example of how you'd cite the papers when we go to the Word document shortly. Then apart from that, I would have sections like that. So imagine all these sections, if you feel like some of them are not really needed with the type of work you're looking at, especially if you're not pointing maybe to your research region, like maybe in this case, Nigeria. Things that you look at are themes like maybe how does that student integrity affect, maybe family influence, peer pressure because of technology, all these things. You think, okay, I feel like this subtopic would be interesting. Then you'd get this as your concept of your literature review. Now, most of the people when they're doing literature review, they do all this literature and they're done. But I think the main goal of your literature should be you finding a gap. That should be your main goal. After reading all this, have you found a gap? Do you feel like there's sufficient information in a given topic, for example, in this case, in Nigeria? That way, even when you want to present your research findings, mainly the people reading the literature want you to show them, I did the research criteria, I did the research review in Nigeria about education, and this is the gaps that are there, these are limitations. That way, it will be much easier. Now, if you don't find information, most people say, oh, what about if the information is not there? That's where now you as a researcher comes in. I think when the previous presenter was presenting, he mentioned about you conducting research, going to do the interview, sitting down with the people you're actually doing the research with, or the research around. If it's concerned around the students, you'd go to students, do questionnaires. Mainly when I'm doing questionnaires or I want people to respond to my research work, or if I'm using Google Scholar or Google Forms, in this case, maybe some people might not have internet. The people that I'm actually doing the Google form or sending the Google form to, I would be filling it for them and asking them while I'm ticking. That way, you'd keep a record of Google Forms, and Google Forms is one of the easiest way of doing data analysis after you have done your your literature review. If you are collecting questions, an example I would give is, let me just share one more screen of an example of when I did a Google form. So there was a time I was conducting a Google form. I think it was about food waste. Let me see. Okay, so this is an example. When you create a questionnaire like this on the Google form in case you're doing maybe about farming in a given region, about integrity, education integrity, and you have created such questions. And if the people that you are doing the research around, maybe they don't have access to phones, that you may be filling that form for them. Google Form allows you to create questionnaires with the type of questions. This is just an example of a research I did some time back. That way, when you get all the responses from the people, it's much easier for you to actually see like the data analysis, like it has drawn pie charts for you, how many people answered yes or no. I know this is not a full Google form, but it will give you room for you to be able to plot graphs for you to easily analyze the responses that are actually given by the research you're conducting. So most of the times, this is the way I actually encourage people to do it. Download the papers, read the papers, be able to do that. Ask AI to bring that down for you so that you can be able to do that. Then from there, get the questionnaires that you need if you need questionnaires. It's not every time that you need questionnaires. Sometimes you would need to do interviews, like audio interviews, one-on-one interviews, maybe people writing down what they're actually doing. If it's responses in this case about education, you'd create a Google form. Maybe about asking questions, what year the students are in, what type of technology do they use. Apart from that, what type do they have access to library? Is there integrity in the teachers? How exam is conducted? That way, you can create a Google form that maybe later when you sit down, you're able to do the responses and be able to give reasoning and understanding and a conclusion out of those responses. Now, when it comes to writing, so I don't know if there is any question or anyone wants to jump in and maybe push in something before I go to the writing part. Is there any question or any add-on while we're still doing going before I go to the writing? I mean, I want it to be as interactive as possible. If you have questions, please feel free to ask, and that way to make it much easier for all of us to learn. I mean, am I the only one in the chat? Maybe, or is everybody's able to get me? Is it?
Yes.
Any questions? Okay. Okay, let me go on to the next part. Now, imagine we have a layout like the one I gave. So I assume I'll pick the one that I actually got from the one I got from all right. So okay, so now imagine you have downloaded the papers, you have read the papers, you have put them in Mendeley. When you sign in as a reference manager on maybe Microsoft Word, the papers that you have done, I'm sure you have seen the one that you actually uploaded comes as the most recent one. So I would advise, if maybe you don't know how to set up Mendeley on maybe Microsoft Word, you can maybe watch a YouTube video, but most of the ones you'd come on Reference Manager here on the tab, they need to ask you to insert maybe add-ons. Then that way you can put Mendeley. If you don't have an account, you create an account. Now, an example is when we created that folder and I dropped in that paper, the paper went directly to the top list here. Now, the reason why this is much easier is every time you're writing something and you have read that paper and you think the information and summary that you're writing is related to that paper, you'd say maybe, I'm just giving an example, let's say education. Then you want to reference where that information came from. You'd actually just maybe pick the paper which you got that insert the citation, and it will insert it. Now, sometimes different ways of writing your literature is different. Maybe other people would want a certain referencing style. So you can go on reference setting, and then you can change your style of referencing. Most of social sciences will do maybe AMA or APSA. That way, you'd say that, then you update your referencing style, and it will update your referencing style and look like that. So depending on maybe your university that you're with, referencing styles are different. And if you have a reference manager, you can be able to see and change your references depending on your writing. Now, that's a good part of you having a reference manager. You dropping your documents in the reference manager. In that way, it can change and update any referencing style. So it will be showing you at the bottom here how the reference would look like at the end and how it will look in between your text. So at the end, when you want to insert your references, I'll just give an example. Just a minute. When you want to put your reference at the end here, when you want to put your reference at the end, I'll save the file, it will be looking like that. So you can be changing different referencing styles. Now, in this way, by the way, remember, this is just an example of the layout of what I actually got, like understanding student integrity and learning culture in Nigeria as a literature review. So you getting that layout, you can actually now customize it. Now, most of the times, the part that you can't maybe use AI and that requires you to actually maybe get an actual writing is maybe why if there is any need of data analysis. Most of the times, literature review is rare that you need to manipulate any of data. But if you're writing a research paper, which is not a literature review, and you have some findings to communicate, there are statistical softwares which you can use to actually generate your findings, conclusions, draw graphs, plots like Excel and all that. That makes it easier. So then the other part of one of the ways of conducting a very good layout of a literature review is where now you can come up with maybe research AI tools. Now I'll just give examples of these ones and I'll name them for you so that you can go and take a look at them. And they're very helpful because I've used them as well. In that way, they're able to map different research together. Now, the first one is, if you're writing, you can just write them down. They are actually much easier. The first one is Research Rabbit. Now, you conducting the way I actually showed you, from downloading a paper from Google Scholar or Web Science to put it into your reference manager, you writing maybe a brief summary about it, then you come to write your notes. In case you want to see how literature is mapped around each paper, most of the times the easiest way to map your research is coming to Research Rabbit. It maps your papers together. It can point which paper referenced which paper is connected to which paper, if this paper cited this paper. That way, your papers can be uploaded in Research Rabbit. There's a free version, and it can be able to map and draw for you which paper was cited more, which paper is connected to which paper. That way, you may actually know how many papers you need to read and which papers are connected to that paper. I used this when I was doing my literature review for my PhD. It was much helpful because I would know where the direction of the research is going, number of years, to which direction is pointing to, which paper was cited more. It draws for you that map. You'd know if more people are researching and reciting that paper, you'd want to read it, even if maybe it's not among them. Research Rabbit does that for you. You'd actually know, okay, if everybody's citing this paper, I need to go and download it. You go and look at it, and it can be able to produce a PDF file for you. So this is just a recommendation. It's very easy for you to use. Then apart from that, another research tool that is actually very helpful is Doc Analyzer. It can give you an analysis and a summary of each and every research paper you're looking at. I encourage this after reading. If you have multiple research papers and you want to be getting a lot of conclusions about it, Doc Analyzer does that for you at very quick. Like you'd have 20 papers to give summary about them, then you just read the summary, and then you see which paper is more interesting, then you'd go to that paper. So another software is Doc Analyzer. Now, it has a component of AI, and that's where now I tell people I think there's a fine line between research integrity of using just AI writing for everything, and also you using AI to give you a brief summary of what that is. Then you look into it and get that paper, reading it yourself, then coming back to the Word document and writing. That way, when you be writing, you'd know the sentences you're writing, they come from, oh, this paper, let me insert, this is where I read this from, I'll insert it here. This is where it came from, okay, I'll insert it here. That way, to be very quick for you to write your literature review and present your findings in a manner that can actually easily be changed in a given format, depending on your university where you're presenting this paper to, or also depending on the journal where you want the paper to be published. So mainly, this is where I said I'll be coming back to the PowerPoint presentation. So that way, you're able to provide evidence, and for future work, you'll be able to say, oh, I did this because this research came from this finding, or this and this researcher found out about this. When you're presenting your research findings, you'll be doing it out of confidence. Like, okay, I've read this, that person is the one who did this. That way, there is that integrity in academic writing. And mainly, that's one of the things which is very hard. But okay, so this was part of my presentation. I think now, because of the pressure students have, okay, so you want AI to do everything. Apart from that, maybe you want to finish your paper, or maybe because of the culture, there is that pressure on students now, just putting everything in ChatGPT, putting everything in Claude, giving you a summary, everything is written. You read what it has written for you, and now that integrity has gone. Okay, so I think I've talked very much. Is there any questions while I think I'm still within range before I move on to the next slide? Okay, so if there is no any other question.
All right, there's an answer. I think someone is raising. Linian, speak.
I don't know. I can see. I can
Good
see.
evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Please, I just wanted to ask if this app is possible to use it on a mobile phone instead of a laptop. Like, is it possible? Is it feasible?
All right. So for Mendeley, there is a mobile app. Then there's an iPad app or any other Android app. But for Research Rabbit, usually it's a web browser. It's much easier on the laptop. But for Mendeley, you're gonna get a mobile app, and it's very doable. So yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But I usually advise people to actually, if they're using Research Rabbit, like the way this was mapping, it's much easier to see not on the mobile device, because you'll be uploading papers here, then it has to be drawing for you this schematic for you to be see, oh, this paper is connected to this paper. The more papers you upload, the better the mapping will be for you to say, okay, you've read these papers, but this paper you're reading is connected to other 3 papers which you need to read. Then you can be able to download them. So it's much easier on the laptop.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Emmanuel, is that all from your side?
Yes, I think that's all on my side.
All
And
right.
this, yes.
Thank you so much, Emmanuel, for that wonderful presentation. So I don't know if there's any question. I would really love you to ask question from this. You really have to ask question. I want you to think about it. Ask questions. So is there any question from your side?
From my side,
No,
I
no, no,
don't think.
not from your
No.
side, Emmanuel. Sorry. All right. So, is there any question for Emmanuel? I mean, any question on literature review or writing? Right, going on. Maybe we'll still have some intensive training on maybe some of the referencing software, probably Zotero. Maybe I'll be taking a section on Zotero when the project starts proper. That's if we'll be needing it. But for now, I don't know if there's any question for Emmanuel regarding to writing